Welcome to Rise and Realign Conversations for the Sensitive Soul. I'm Melissa, and this space is for those of us who feel deeply, love fiercely, and sense the world in ways that are hard to explain but impossible to ignore. Here, we honor your sensitivity as a strength, not something to fix. Through reflections, realignment, and soul led stories, we remember how to move through life in a way that feels true to who we really are. This is your space to rise, to realign, and to come home again and again to your own wise, sensitive self. So, today is actually a continuation of my last episode, episode 28, called Wearing One Hat: Authenticity, Human Design, and Uranus in Gemini Resonance. And, I continue to see posts, on LinkedIn and Instagram from different psychiatrists who I respect. They have very different perspectives. But it really, all four of these who show up in my feed the most, really speak to very different, like I said, perspectives, angles, experiences. But they bring me back to why I just feel called to keep highlighting, you know, that those of us who are highly sensitive really do benefit from having the reminders, of how there are so many different perspectives that we can have, right, as individuals. And each of our bodies need different things, right? There's no one right way or one right path for everyone. And so we can't outsource, right, our authority. The days of just trusting what a doctor told you or whatever the profession is, teacher, it really doesn't matter, right? Like those days of just, honor and obey whoever that other person is, right? Like that is not, what serves us, any of us, but especially those of us who are highly sensitive, right? Like the days of dismissing, our own body's signals, and whether that's through a physical symptom or even, what we would just describe as that felt sense. Like you just don't know how to describe it, perhaps, but you just have this inner knowing, like we are in the time of awakening. I mean, gosh, one of my favorite songs is, The Age of Aquarius and Let the Sun Shine In. It's like, finally, like more people, more and more, are talking about, you know, um, just understanding how we're all connected, but we're each having a very unique and individual experience. And I like exploring the information that I'm guided to, and I've said like certain things come to me and they just don't resonate with me. And I just say, okay, that's not for me, right? It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with it. And then there's other things that I'm like, okay, I didn't quite like that initially, but I'm still curious, right? And let me continue to explore. And that's something that's really helpful as highly sensitive individuals, right? Is to pay attention. What do you feel resistance to? And what do you feel really lit up about? Because resistance doesn't always mean it's not for you, right? It may be just bumping up against an old belief or a fear that you have, right? But back to why I'm recording a second podcast today is that the topic of, anxiety and specifically, depressive symptoms, like that is really important to me because I've absolutely lived through my own periods of heightened anxiety, really interfering in my ability to feel fully myself, fully vibrant and alive and healthy and happy, right? And it dealt with gut issues and, just lots of things. But also, I dealt with periods of depression. And, often those were around, the grieving process, right? Like when my brother passed, or when, some of my unborn children passed. Um, those are really deep, dark periods for me. But also, I had traumatic pregnancies, deliveries, and postpartum. And so, depression came for me then, and a medication at the time was beneficial and it helped turn things around for me. But then another pregnancy came, and another round of depression. And this time the medication didn't help me, And so, again, through my own lived experiences, and what I've been opened up to just really understand that they are symptoms, right? And that we need to be curious about all areas of our life, what's going on, because medication, that's a temporary, short term support when needed, right? But that's not a long term solution. It's just not. And, I love that, again, there's more people speaking out, about other theories and other approaches to understanding it, right? Like, I'm a fan of Dr. Christopher Palmer and his brain energy, right? Like, really highlighting how it's, a lot of it is mitochondria and metabolic dysfunction. And when we understand that, and we understand, how does nutrition fit into this, right? How does sunlight, right? How does grounding, how does understanding the vagus nerve, like there's so many aspects, that are important for us to understand. Now, when I was experiencing depressive symptoms, I didn't know any of that. Being in the mental health field doesn't mean that we're trained in all aspects, right? um and we're each having our own interests. So when we do our continuing education, year after year, we get to choose what area to do it in, right? So mine became the focus on that more holistic approach. And I really want to understand, you know, how to support my body, what foods help, me recover from, back then it was Hashimoto's I was focusing on, right? Um, but I was also told, like, take this synthetic thyroid medication for the rest of your life. And it's like, no, that's not for me. I don't remember how long I took it. Definitely was on it for years, but that in and of itself, I just didn't feel like myself. And I can't tell you how many women, I've had the honor of supporting, who come to me saying, like, I've tried medication, it didn't help, it flattened me, it blunted me, right? And, that takes courage, right? When we say, no, there's got to be another way. Medication is not the cure. It's not, it's not even the optimal treatment approach. Um, so we really need to understand, our sleep, our nutrition, all the inputs that we receive. Now, as highly sensitive individuals, we are taking in like 5 times more stimuli than people who don't have this trait. Now, if the majority of the professionals who are prescribing don't consider that, right? Or brush it off, then again, you're not being treated as the unique individual that you are, And again, oftentimes, if we go to a professional, we're looking to them to tell us more than we already know. And what I find truly fascinating is for the highly sensitive women who come to work with me, like their intelligence, right? Their curiosity, their openness, right? In these different areas. Every one of them is different. Some are way more interested and open to, you know, the holistic path, and willing to really explore, okay, what am I doing that's helping my sleep, or what am I doing that's you know nourishing my body, staying hydrated, right? Like all of these different things. But I think that what's being highlighted currently around depression itself, like that acknowledgement that it's not a chemical imbalance like was often believed. And I mean, this is evolution, right? I mean, gosh, think of back when doctors were smoking and talking about uh that as not a problem at all, right? Or how many doctors recommend that people drink alcohol, right? And now we're at a place where, it's very clear, right? Cigarette smoking, like those are toxic chemicals, they're carcinogens. And alcohol, right? I mean, these are toxic um toxic items that were previously recommended. And we're seeing the same thing in the medical, in the pharmaceuticals, right? In so many different ways. And so I again just feel my heart needs to keep saying, like, as a sensitive woman, specifically, you have quicker access to that felt sense, to your own intuition, but you might be bogged down by the fact that you receive more stimuli, right? You get overwhelmed faster. You process your experiences and your thoughts more deeply. So you may grieve more deeply, longer, right, than other people. So when we're talking about changes, transitions, right? Whether it's something we would consider positive, right? Like becoming a mom, like that was my life dream, was to become a mom, right? I had no idea that that path was going to be so challenging, so difficult, so traumatic. I mean, on so many levels, the things that I encountered during that period, right? So that's why I'm saying, like, life happens, and it can create an overwhelm to our system. And so depressive symptoms can show up, anxiety can show up, right? Because that stress, that's creating a positive charge in our body, and our bodies run on a negative charge. Each of our organs has its own, like, you know, um, level of negative charge. And these are not things that we were raised to understand, right? I mean, I'm so grateful for the work of so many amazing individuals in the field of, you know, quantum physics, quantum mechanics, quantum biology for health, like Dr. Catherine Clinton, you know. And I'm really grateful for the work of Dr. Leslie Korn, who, I've trained with both of these amazing doctors, and just from the perspective of mental health and medication, that is not the only way. And it's actually a way that, again, can cause more disruption when we are overloaded, overwhelmed, high stress, chronic stress, right? Like, it's a temporary mask, and it can often be even more challenging when somebody says, well, I want to get off of it now. And often, again, as highly sensitive individuals, you're intelligent, right? So many um, don't go then back to their doctor and say, I want to get off. I certainly have several, um, more than several, but there's a balance between, like, the number of women that just decide to get off their medication, but they still don't have the awareness and the understanding of what their body's going to go through as that chemical, that they had been taking in, is either decreased or is removed. And so it really is important to be educated. If you are somebody who did say yes to medication because you didn't know that there were so many other ways of viewing and understanding depressive symptoms, right? I mean, we're talking hormones, we're talking sleep, we're talking nutrition, right? We're talking light exposure, like blue light, right? Like there's so many aspects of what lends to us feeling depressive symptoms and how long they last. And so for high sensitivity trait, it is really important to know yourself. Are you a highly sensitive person? And if you are, be educated, educate yourself. And again, Dr. Elaine Aron, she is the research psychologist who shared this with us in the 1990s. And there are others who are, speaking about high sensitivity from their own lived experiences. So definitely, educate yourself. Know that there's research, right? It is absolutely um, real, and it's in over 100 species, right? But also to understand your own journey, you know, and the gifts that are within you can be more accessed when you create the space to really slow down, calm your nervous system, you know, start really opening up, that space to not just breathe, right? Which I'm always guiding because, breath is our bridge. Um, but also like there's so much to process as highly sensitive individuals. And so when you start to slow down and say, okay, I do want to learn about myself, I do want to understand what makes me unique in this way. How do I honor my body's signals? You know, um, more things can come up, right? Because again, like we notice subtleties, we notice the different nuances, the patterns. So it's quite the journey to wake up to the awareness that you're a highly sensitive person and what that means, right? But also how to navigate the challenges, right? When anxiety is high, right? When stress is chronic, right? And when um, the depressive symptoms, may come in. Um, it's just really important because medication serves a purpose in certain situations. But again, my own awakening journey helped me to see and realize that that was not the path for me. My sensitive body made it very clear that I was done with that path. And you've heard me talk about naturopathic physicians. Um, and they're all each unique and different as well. But as a highly sensitive person, really understand, you know, why you may be experiencing the symptoms that you are, and actually take the time to breathe, to get yourself centered, to connect with your own heart and ascertain like are you at a place in your journey where it would be beneficial to receive support, to receive education in, the areas of sensitivity and any of the other ones that I spoke to, right? And would it be supportive to come together with other highly sensitive women and professionals? Um, because again, your path is uniquely yours, and you are here not just as a sensitive soul, right? But somebody who has a journey, and you came into this world with your soul group family, and um, there can be different things to navigate, and it's not the easiest, but um, there's so many other ways to tend to how you're feeling. And there's different ways of understanding if you've taken medication and, you know, you don't want to anymore. You want to honor your body. Like there are safe pathways for doing that. Um, and again, I'm really grateful to be hearing more and more from different psychiatrists who are speaking up about this. And I really love too Christopher Palmer um, was briefly in the cholesterol code that was available on Amazon just recently. And that was really eye-opening for me to hear because, so much again about cholesterol. There's so much misinformation out there. And more people are speaking up about how it's incorrect information that needs to stop getting carried forward. So we're talking about, the effects of medication on all people, but for me, especially sensitive people, right? Your body has a sensory intelligence. And so tune into those signals and what it's communicating so that you can make the adjustments. You can realign what your body needs, what you need to feel your best, to feel vibrant, right? But to also understand what may be influencing you, in the environment, which can be, work, family, neighborhood, things like that, but it can also be what's going on with the planets, right? With the moon. Um, Again, as sensitive beings, there's so much that we can be aware of and to just trust more. Um, and trust is definitely one of those most important things for us to be able to trust in ourselves, right? And to trust that we're part of something bigger, you know, the vastness, right? That there is this universal intelligence that's organizing and orchestrating things, right? That you don't need to push, you don't need to try so hard, you don't need to shove down feelings, um, but to trust yourself. So if you are somebody who has taken, antidepressants, or other medication that, you're just not sure if that's the path for you, then definitely talk with your doctors, you know, work with other professionals who can support you. Um, and I'm certainly a holistic psychotherapist, and I'm here to support sensitive women who are waking up to what it means to be highly sensitive, right? How to navigate when your provider may not be hearing you, may not be looking at the things in your labs that need to be looked at, who may not be um, as open and curious and interested as you are in discovering how else to support your unique makeup. Because again, as highly sensitive individuals, you are taking in more, right? So that means you're going to feel the effects of things more intensely. So again, I know this was a lot on my own journey, but I share it just because, again, I want you to know like you're not alone and there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with any of us. But what's important to understand is that besides that broader explanation that we're all unique and different individuals, it is important when you look at it from the lens of roughly 80% of the population don't feel the effects of things as deeply as those who are highly sensitive. And so for me, like when people talk about the research on medications or different things, the question that comes up in the back of my mind is, yeah, and how many of those people are sensitive individuals? Because if they're not discerning, like, okay, this number of people, have this high sensitivity trait and this number of people don't, then how can I rely on those um, studies, right? Because I'm a highly sensitive person. I need to make sure that if I were to consider something, that the research was speaking to my kind of makeup. But even as I say that, I'm not somebody who anymore, really looks to research the way I used to. Because when you truly realign with your truth, your voice, who you're really here to be, right? Like you have your own inner guidance, you have your own inner compass. And trusting in that, that's king above everything else, right? Because it doesn't matter what the research says, because what matters is what you feel is true for you, right? So being able to trust yourself, being able to understand how you're designed, you know, what your purpose and path is about. Like that's what's really key for me is to know yourself, understand yourself, and understand that you are part of something so much greater. And boy, we can just have a field day talking about all the different kinds of things there are to talk about, once you are just being yourself. In the last episode, I talked about how I'm a manifesting generator type, right? And I'm born under the, uh, um, my sun sign is Gemini. And um, my actual sun sign from a human design lens, it's um, it's 20.3. So for me, it's all about the now. So I speak from what is rising in me now. And so that's why I decided to do this second episode, just because, the frequency of these posts that I'm seeing, around, again, Christopher Palmer talking about brain energy and the cholesterol code and just the importance of us understanding mitochondria and metabolic dysfunction. Like, that's huge. And again, I'm grateful for my integrative mental health and quantum biology approach because it's changed my life, how much more I trust myself and how I'm caring for myself. Um, but it's also, you know, I'm coming across psychiatrists talking about indigo children, crystal children, rainbow children. And I'm like, wow, that's new. I hadn't come across any speaking that way before. And after my awakening, when I first visited Sedona, Arizona, that's when I was more open and curious. And, people were telling me, oh, your children, they're crystal children. And I was just like, I don't know what that means. But again, that all started coming about before I understood this framing of being a highly sensitive person. And it just opened my door, to understanding. There's so much more going on than a lot of us realize. And the more we can be open and curious and trusting in our own inner guidance, right? Because I can say something and say, this is what I know, but it doesn't mean that's something that's going to feel safe and comfortable to you and something that you can trust, right? Like you need to trust how something feels for you. So it comes down to, what's resonating for you. So again, there's the one approach, where we look at that mitochondria and metabolic function, right? There's another perspective of, how some of us are coming in, again, from that soul perspective of why we're coming in differently, what purpose that serves for the planet. There's others who are, again, talking about, tapering people safely off antidepressant medication and really raising awareness to how many incorrect, old recommendations and theories and perspectives have still been carried forward, and how we want more and more people to wake up to that, right? Like, we can't keep playing the same old records. That's not going to serve us in the long run, right? Or even in the short run from my perspective. But again, it takes a commitment to ourselves, right? It takes a commitment to us as a collective that we're all here together. So let's do our best to understand and know ourselves, right? And honor each other's paths as completely different. And what's good for one person may not be good for another person at all. And that's not a problem, right? So, this part two, so to speak, episode was really just to touch on um, you being more aware of whether you're a highly sensitive person and what recommendations are you considering or have you already taken around medication, substances, you know, identifying with a particular identity or diagnosis, right? Like, I'm always here to speak from my heart and to remind you that there's nothing wrong with you. It's about being true to you, knowing yourself, and letting go of what doesn't serve you. Because again, you're tuned in, you're realigning with who you really are. So, before we close, I invite you to return to your breath, to your body, and to what feels true for you right now. If you'd like to take a break and breathe love with me, I invite you to inhale through your nose, another inhale, and then exhale. And again, that exhale can be a sigh, it can be a slow blowing out a candle. Sometimes I do it while I'm smiling. It's really up to you. The important thing is that you're breathing in deeply, and a second inhale, and then exhale. Remember, there's nothing you need to fix. Just notice what's here. Where the heart leads, the body remembers, and the soul awakens. As a reminder, we are here together to rise, reclaim, remember. And as always, I'm so grateful you're here. And if you'd like to explore ways to work with me, my new pathway of your sensitivity is Intelligent Design Essentials course for sensitive and strong women is available on my website, as is my Rise and Realign Lunar Letter. You can find everything at realignwithmelissa.com. Take good care of you. Much love and light.